We've been telling you for years, and especially recently, that the US dollar and a US passport are going to become increasingly toxic, and you want other options. Well, now, beyond BRICS, beyond the global south, there's a new group of several countries that's teaming up. Their goal to make the US dollar and the United States a rogue country and a rogue currency. Here's the plan, and here's what you need to know. I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. I'm here on location in Lisbon, and we help high net worth clients legally go where you're treated best at nomadcapitalist.com/apply. I wanted to share an article with you that popped into my feed from the UK Telegraph's Economic Intelligence Unit, talking about how Trump's aggression is uniting a formidable alliance against him. Their plan is to turn the United States into a rogue economy. Now, this is not about causing you to freak out, but it is about the message I've been telling you for many years. U.S. passports under Obama became more toxic because your options to bank and invest overseas became more limited. But the same can happen under Republicans like Trump. We have more American clients coming to us now saying, I want a backup plan because I want to be able to keep investing and banking and doing business and selling my services and products overseas. I don't want what's happening in the United States right now to come back and make me more poor. Here's the article. Donald Trump has achieved his first global peace deal. China, Japan, and South Korea, those are the three countries, have kissed and made up after years of trade quarrels, and they've pledged to deepen ties and reorganize the Asian and global trading systems under what amounts to Chinese leadership. The picture blazoned across Asia's front pages, though barely registering in the United States, has showed the trade ministers of these three economic powers holding hands in a collective gesture of Asian defiance. China, Japan, and South Korea. They haven't always got along, and what do I tell you? If you're sitting in the United States, or really anywhere in the West, you're seeing news that's very localized. That's what they want you to hear. Are you seeing the headlines of how another group of countries is getting together to take a whack at your currency in your country? No, not so much. And if you do, it's going to be through a certain lens only. This is why we read newspapers all around the world. But the Telegraph continues, it is one of the most striking economic defeats suffered by the United States that the writer has witnessed in more than 40 years covering international affairs. He says Trump's Liberation Day, the tariffs that have been imposed, cuts two ways. These countries agreed to forge ahead with free trade agreements, but also to flesh out, here's the issue, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the world's largest trade pact on paper, and a venture viewed by U.S. hardliners as a Trojan horse for Chinese commercial hegemony. For all intents and purposes, the U.S. is now a rogue nation when it comes to trade. That's according to Michael Gasorek, the director of the UK Trade Policy Observatory at the University of Sussex, of course, in the UK, where the Telegraph is based. So what you're seeing is people in the West who are looking globally, and they're seeing stuff like this happening. Hey, this is a threat. I've been telling you a couple things in recent years. One of them is sanctions. The U.S. government has sanctioned about 31% of the world, effectively, up from 8% at the turn of the century. Meanwhile, a lot of those countries are becoming more wealthy. They are pulling back from the geopolitical positions they were pushed into. They are increasingly doing deals with Russia and China and the global south and with each other because they said, we don't think we're bad people. Why can't we be part of the global economy? They don't need the United States. What you're also seeing is the U.S. dollar share of the world reserve currency. It's gone from the 70s down to the 50s. If it keeps going at that rate, by the middle of the century, it will barely be about a third of the world's global reserve currency. And what do I always tell you? There's not going to be one thing that takes over for the U.S. dollar. There's not going to be one country that takes over for the United States. And more importantly, there's not going to be just one place that you want to go and protect yourself. Multipolarity in the world, increasing fragmentation. People have options, and so do you. Out of all the messages you're not seeing in the newspapers in the U.S., in the West, it is you have more options than ever. That's one reason why we have a 4-day annual event we invite people to. It's in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We call it Nomad Capitalist Live. We host it in a place that you might not think is that great. I happen to think it's pretty great, but you might not have gotten that message if you live in the West. And so what these countries around the world, in response to sanctions, in response to the growing threat of de-dollarization, they're basically getting together and saying, hey, the U.S. is a rogue nation. People who are paying attention realize that. Michael goes on to say, I don't think there is a global trade war going on. I think the U.S. is fighting a trade war with everybody, but the others are keen to cooperate even more. And so it goes on to how China has launched a charm offensive to woo European officials and companies to the point of inviting the heads of Mercedes and BMW to meet Xi Jinping, right? You're hearing a lot about BYD and the other car companies in China. I do live in Malaysia part-time, and I see ads for these Chinese cars. I'll tell you what, these cars look pretty impressive, some of what they're putting out. Not just BYD, but there's other brands that I see advertised. And in Malaysia, a country that was very friendly to the U.S. and is still a very friendly country in general, they're doing most of their trade deals and most of their deals in general now with China. And they're saying China's the future. Their products are better. Their government, wants to be more involved with us than the U.S. does. And so now what you're seeing is the European Union, whether you like them or not, they're taking their block of 500 million consumers and saying, all right, we got to find more trade deals. What do you see Mark Carney, the new leader of Canada, saying? The U.S. is no longer a reliable partnership. Our relationship, quote unquote, is over. And we need to go and find deals somewhere else. So much so that people were half joking that Canada should join the European Union and join their trade bloc. And so what you're seeing is this trade war. I'm not taking a side. I quite frankly don't care. I'm no longer a U.S. citizen. All of our stock portfolios have taken a beating a little bit. But I'll tell you what, when I go look at my stocks, I looked at some of my stocks in China and Singapore. Yeah, some of them got beaten up. Number one, I take a more defensive position. But some of my stocks in Asia, they've actually, outperformed even during the tariff market meltdown. And so by being diversified, you could have avoided this $11 trillion of wealth that was wiped out of people's portfolios. But what you're seeing is now Canada and the EU and so many other places on top of Africa, on top of Southeast Asia. I mean, they're increasingly going and they want to do business with China. Now, you can say you don't like China. You can say CCP. You can say whatever you want. These countries are putting themselves first, and they're saying the U.S. is not a reliable partner. There is more pressure with this deal to not do business in U.S. dollars. And it's basically everybody getting together. And so when I add that to the fact of they just extended the sale of TikTok to a U.S. buyer, and Amazon's getting in and they want to buy it. Imagine you started a business that went global and some country said, yeah, we just don't like the country that your business is from. And you saw some of those guys from TikTok, the executives being grilled in the U.S. Senate, who don't understand you can be of Chinese origin but be like a Singaporean citizen, as one of the executives was. Imagine you created a business and it went global, and then a big government somewhere else just decided, hey, you have to sell that. If China did that, people would be up in arms. The United States is doing it, and Americans may not be in the headlines as, hey, we're taking over this company. Isn't that great? Rah, rah, America. Everyone else, China, Japan, South Korea, Europe, Canada, they're all getting together and saying this is a rogue nation. And so if we just look at the continued trajectory of your options as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as someone selling products, as maybe someone who just wants to invest, my portfolio has held up a lot better in those days of the market meltdown because I'm diversified in countries where it wasn't melting down as much. Yes, everybody took some heat, but my portfolio versus a purely U.S. portfolio did better. And so I look at this continuing to play out and saying, if I'm an American business, how long am I going to be able to continue to sell my products overseas? And have no doubt, we're already seeing businesses in the United States go and talking to their elected representatives and saying, what are you doing to help us? Because we're going to lose a lot of business because, actually, somewhere in the supply chain, we're selling stuff or we're buying stuff from overseas. This idea that, hey, we just live in the U.S., we can deal with ourselves, it's really not going to work. And people realize that in a matter of days. The rest of the world is looking at this as the perfect opportunity, particularly the Chinas, particularly the South Koreas and the Japans. Hey, listen, let's go and forge our own deals. This is the perfect moment to cut the U.S. out. And so the article continues and it talks about how tariffs are more unsettling than COVID in terms of the market. You can read the whole article on the Telegraph website. It talks again about India also loosely joining in and certain Scandinavian countries joining in. I mean, basically everyone's joining in against the U.S. And listen, if you have an everyday job and you live in Birmingham, Alabama, maybe I do think this will actually have an effect. I mean, tourism to the U.S. is down because of how they're treating foreign tourists, and I do think it will have an effect on a lot of people. But maybe the average person can ride this out for some time. But if you are the person that's a Nomad Capitalist client, if you have $1 million or more, if you have a business, if you have a portfolio, I think you're going to become toxic. And I mean, again, Obama started that. I think it was even started long before that, but Obama really started this move towards U.S. passports and U.S. people being toxic. Now, I think your ability to travel certain places could be curtailed. Maybe not, in amazing amounts. I don't know that Europe is going to shut Americans out, but I think there'll be fewer places to go. I think when the next Black Swan event happens and Americans are saying, hey, we want to get out of here, there'll be fewer places that want you to get in. I think there'll be more countries that impose restrictions on your getting a residence permit. I don't know how bad it'll get, but I do think your options to bank, invest, set up your company, sell your stuff overseas is going to be worse. The biggest thing that we talk about that you can do to help yourself is have another identity, not by changing your name or doing anything untoward, but by legally having a second passport, a third passport. I gave up the U.S. passport. So wherever I go to do business and I set up a company, I can list one of those other passports. And even if I have to list all of the passports, none of them are the United States. None of them really are that toxic. I know that, there's banks in Singapore, for example. And we also don't like British clients that much anymore. I mean, these big countries that have had this hegemony, I think are going to be increasingly toxic. In wealth havens, places to put your wealth. There's going to be a recession. I don't want all my money in U.S. banks. Some of the biggest bank failures in U.S. history just happened a couple years ago. What happens when Congress says, you know what, we're done bailing out the big banks. We're done bailing out depositors who have more than $250,000. You didn't expect that bank to go under? Tough luck. You just lost all your money. I'd like to have my money diversified in some of the strongest banks in the world. Statistically, some of those are in Singapore. But if you're toxic to a Singaporean bank, how are you going to move your money there? You're already toxic in many cases to Swiss banks if you're an American. Now, there are ways we do this with, if you like an offshore trust, and it's a passive structure that could be easier to get a Swiss bank. But you want to protect yourself from being toxic. I am less toxic, for example, to the Singapore bank. I have more options of what to do with my money once it's there because I gave them a certificate of loss of nationality saying I'm no longer a U.S. passport holder. I would say the same thing going and setting up your company somewhere. I would say the same thing when I go to sell our services. We have clients all around the world, contrary to popular belief from some of the commenters who think, as this article suggests, that, he speaks English, so all the clients must be Americans. Americans are not our number one client base. We love Americans that we help. We've got British, we've got Canadian, we do have Americans, we do have Germans. We also had people in Brazil and Colombia and Mexico, and we do business all over. I wouldn't want to risk that because I think those are growth markets by saying, well, you know what, we're going to reciprocate and say American services that are sold to our people, you've got to do this or that. Why would I want to risk that for the sake of having a passport from a country that really doesn't do that much for its citizens, that taxes you out the wazoo in exchange for what? Free what? Healthcare? No. You're paying not that far off European level taxes for nothing. And by the way, one thing we help our clients do is move to Ireland, Malta, Cyprus, Greece, other tax-friendly countries that may not have low taxes for people who've lived there their entire life, but they want foreigners to come in, and they'll give you a really sweet tax deal. Italy's another one. Poland's another one. I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe you can go to, and you can get a much better tax deal than the United States would offer you, even as an American. We help our clients do that. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. What if you could live in one of those countries and get their passport 5 years from now? What if you could be Italian and American? Would you really want the baggage of being an American? Now, I understand that the European Union, it has its own issues. And so what I would suggest is, depending on how successful you are, get a couple of second passports. Get a Caribbean passport. Who are they bothering? Maybe claim citizenship through your ancestry. It just became harder in Italy. But if you have ancestry, grandparents from somewhere in Europe or Latin America, you may be able to get a passport there. You could move somewhere and work towards a passport. I mean, there's so many different ways to get passports. What I've been telling you for years, you're seeing why right now. And I'm reading the tea leaves a little bit, and I'm seeing these trade deals, and I'm saying, they're going to just cut the U.S. out. Yes, the U.S. does have some heft. Yes, when Trump says stuff, markets around the world ripple. Less than it has been. I think if this would have happened, 30 years ago, it would have been a bigger impact. I think more countries are getting together and saying we can do our own thing, including countries that have historically had a beef, as in these three. That's why they're calling it Trump's first peace deal. Three countries that didn't always get along that much got together to do trade because they want to be sufficient outside of that Western system. And so not only having a second passport is important, but if I go and get that bank account in Singapore or in Switzerland, I can have multiple currencies. I have an asset that just went up $100,000 the other day, not because it got more valuable, but because the dollar sank against the currency that asset is denominated in. And so if you could hold money in different currencies, if you could make investments in different currencies, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing, as Trump says. This is the impact. We'll keep talking about it. I do believe if you have a U.S. passport, even if you voted for Trump, you are going to see some toxic effects. Have a second passport, have money somewhere else. I don't know what could happen in the future about capital controls in the U.S. I might not even want to have all that money in my own name. I might want to look into that trust structure, quite frankly, because one thing we know about bullies, one thing we know about people who are used to getting their own way and countries that are used to getting their own way is that when people have options and they take advantage of all the competition you didn't know existed, is they're not just going to take it lying down. So if you want our help in doing that, we don't just sell bank account openings. We don't just sell second passports. What we do is we create bespoke and holistic plans for folks where it's evaluating your needs, your concerns, the unknown unknowns, and figuring out, hey, here's what you need within the context of what you have. Obviously, someone who has $1 million is going to have a different set of options than someone who has $100 million. We do ask you to have $1 million in liquid assets to work with us because the stuff we do and the way we do it, it is not cheap, but it's worth it. And what we look at in a bespoke plan is making sure you get not only a good ROI, but a good return on peace, and to make sure that your money and your family and your safety are going to be, secured by getting second passports and moving money overseas and doing all the stuff we talk about. We do it all under one roof. You don't have to hire 7 different people. We've built a network of hundreds of vendors around the world who help us do the tax work, help you buy the real estate, open the bank accounts. We know which stuff works in the real world. That's why I've got dozens of bank accounts around the world, and I've closed plenty more, because we actually do this stuff. We don't just sell it, we live it. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Put that personal experience that I've been working on this stuff for a long time to work for you. I've built the service that I wish existed for me, having done it and seen the pitfalls. You might just think, hey, I'll get a second passport from this company over here. I'll save a few bucks. Well, you could come to us and we might tell you, hey, you don't have to spend $200,000 for a Caribbean passport. You can get this one for practically free. And so, yeah, you paid us a fee to get that advice, but if net you saved money, well, that's the name of the game. On top of that, you don't have to go to different companies when you go to Nomad Capitalist. We do it all under one roof. We have the people that you need. We have the real world experience. And having suffered the pains of doing stuff the wrong way or the inefficient way, I've built a service with an entire R&D team, client strategy team, client execution team that does things the way I wish they were done. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Learn how we can help you.